Holy City Center Radio, this is episode 140, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, June 30th, 2023. First off, happy birthday to my dad. Today is his birthday, and I'm extra happy and excited to celebrate because he is here in Charleston still with my mom. Unfortunately, my brother and his family have left after our nice visit. They came here a few days after our trip to Disney World. So my niece and nephew are gone with my brother and my sister-in-law. So the place is, my house is a little bit quieter right now, but not in a way that, I'm not saying that in a negative way. Like they were so loud when they were here, they're great kids. And, it was more than welcome to have them here to chat with, to joke around with, watch TV, go places, and all that. So it's quieter, but that doesn't mean better. Definitely miss them already, but happy to have my parents here and excited to celebrate my dad's birthday in Charleston. And hopefully we'll find something fun to do in town. See what he wants to do to celebrate, but. Yep, should be a good day. For all of you out there, maybe you're not celebrating a birthday today, but looking for something fun to do this weekend. Yes, it's Friday, so you might be looking to go out tonight. Maybe it's Saturday, maybe Sunday, maybe all three. And the best place to find events, of course, is on holycitycenter.com. Go to /events after the website address, and you'll see our calendar and be able to see what exactly is going on in town. Get on there, find something fun to do this weekend, and let me know what you did and if there's something you recommend so I can pass that along to other folks. Before we get into the stories, one other thing I just wanted to quickly touch on, in the rush of getting back after vacation and, trying to get things situated. I didn't have a chance to talk about this on past podcasts this week, but this Monday was a sad anniversary for myself and many others in the Charleston community. It was, let's see, 5th anniversary of the death of Box, who his real name Richard Bachschmidt, but he went by Box on the radio. He was a DJ here in town. He worked for a couple different stations when he was here in Charleston. Previous to that, I believe he worked in the Tampa area. But just a really cool guy who I met in the early days of doing the website. He was always super kind. He always seemed to be in a great mood, ready to chat, ready to joke around. He invited me on his radio show when he was on, one of the traditional terrestrial stations here. And then eventually he started doing his own show that was entirely online. And he invited me on that a couple times. And, he was also busy in the community, whether it was hosting events that he had to do through his job at the radio station or just attending because he wanted to. He was a fixture in the community for sure, and it was a sad day when we lost him. And it still stinks. I still think about him often, as I know some of my friends who knew him still do as well. And so if you knew him, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you didn't, you missed out on a great guy who brought joy to people, whether it was from, the silly things he would say on air, because he did a bunch of different shows through the years, but those last few years he was doing a morning show, so a lot of people are familiar with those programs. And they, I know things are different now, but for a long time, morning DJs for a lot of people, that was who you heard most days on your commute. You almost feel like you're part of that team, whatever the morning host team is. So I know a lot of people, certainly still miss him and at least remember, part of what he was all about here. So I just wanted to mention that. And there's a pinned tweet on my Twitter account for those of you who use Twitter that includes a quote from him about mental health and suicide that he talked about on his online program. And unfortunately, he had struggles with his mental health and ultimately did die by suicide. And his quote was about how people don't talk about those things enough. And although I was already in that mindset as myself struggle from a mental illness, was a reminder that we should talk about these things more for many reasons, not just ending the stigma, but also understanding where other people are coming from if their behaviors aren't in line with what we suspect. We might be able to recognize things in other people to better understand them, and also to know how to better assist people who have certain mental health struggles. What to say, what not to say, what warning signs to look out for certain issues. And so, in any event, wanted to touch on that. Take care of your mental health. Don't be afraid to talk about it with somebody, and don't be afraid to ask a friend if they need some help, or if they seem to be struggling or things are getting dark, reaching out to them and letting them know you care and you're here to help if they need it. So we miss you, Box, and it's certainly not the same here in Charleston without you. So with that, we'll move on to the local news. First up, it was a no good, very bad press conference for Representative Nancy Mace earlier this week. It should have just been a routine press conference, or actually, maybe not should have been. I think Representative Mace thought it was going to be a routine press conference. Nice little photo op for her to post on her social media and talk about in her weekly newsletter that she sends out. It was all about the CARTA bus system here in Charleston, getting a grant to help out with numerous things. I mentioned it in the last podcast. I've kind of alluded to these things. And it did not go the way I think she thought it was going to go. So, like I said, this was a routine press conference. It was just CARTA, Mike Seekings, who's the chairman and also on Charleston City Council, was there. They were just going to announce this grant. But Representative Mace inserted herself into the press conference, and the day before it sent out a media alert saying she was going to be there to celebrate her securing the funds. As I mentioned in the last podcast, she actually voted against those funds. It was part of the infrastructure law, the bipartisan law that President Biden's administration put forth and was passed, and she voted against it. So it was interesting to a lot of folks. Why are you saying you helped secure these funds when you voted against it? So at this press conference, she was asked about that. What are you doing here, basically? And what are the optics of, you being here celebrating something that you voted against? And it wasn't just that she voted against it. It's also that when she was planning on voting against it, she went on a media tour. I know, surprise, surprise, she'd never met a television camera she didn't like. But she said things like she called the bill a fiasco and a socialist wish list. And that didn't change anything. She still showed up at the June 28th, that's Wednesday, the press conference in support of the local effort. Now, a few people have pointed out online, defenders and such, that, what's the problem here? She wasn't voting against what funds for this project. She didn't like other parts of the bill that she and others on the Republican side felt shouldn't be part of an infrastructure law. And I get that. There's nothing wrong with that. I hate politics as much as I talk about it. I hate it for many reasons. One of them is it takes forever to get things done. And then when things are done, you get these bills and all this crap is added in it. That has nothing to do with the actual issue. And things get hung up because of that. And important legislation sometimes isn't passed because stupid things is tacked onto it. So I totally get that. That's fine. This could be the worst bill in history. And her vote could be 100% right. The issue, of course, was not only did she vote against it, but she went on and said all these things about it and then tried to take credit for what that bill provided. She could have easily showed up. She should have had an answer ready, because this should not have been a surprise question, and she did not, and it did not go well for her. So let's get into some of the details. The law brought nearly $26 million, again, in grant money for the CARTA Regional Transit Hub, and will help CARTA transition to a fully electric bus fleet by 2040. Mace, again, she joined the majority Republicans, not all of them. Some people, including Senator Lindsey Graham, actually voted for the infrastructure law. So she defended her support of the transit center by saying anything that benefits the Charleston area, minus the politics, she will back. She said, when asked about the optics, what do you want me to do? Turn my back on the low country when we get funding for public transit? Absolutely not. So, again, I don't think anybody's saying she should turn her back on funding. I don't think anyone's even necessarily saying, and I'm certainly not saying that she can't take part in a press conference, but she can't try to take credit for it. That was the issue. She was trying to take credit for something that she vehemently didn't voted against and spoke out against. That's what people don't like. That's politics as usual, and people took exception to it. And it wasn't just people in the area. News of, her press conference made it up to Orangeburg, where Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg was with Congressman Jim Clyburn doing a press conference as well. They were touting a different project that was a $23 million grant to help build a pedestrian bridge and a transit hub to better connect neighborhoods and surrounding college campuses up in the Orangeburg area. Buttigieg took a moment to respond after he was at it. You can see the video. He was trying to be thoughtful about it. He was asked about House Republicans celebrating these infrastructure projects that were funded by a law they voted against. After a pause asking what he would say to them, he said, "Well, I would say welcome aboard." And he had a big smile. And then he said, "Look, this is good policy. And it's true that not every member of Congress was there with us when we were working to get this done. It turns out this is no barrier to them being glad to see that funding came to their district." Basically saying, like, we're not going to punish a congressperson's constituents because they voted against something that we put forth. And then, I mean, that's how politics should be. I'm sure you remember reporting about Donald Trump where, there'd be reports, and I think he's even said out loud. So this isn't like, oh, well, anonymous sources say. It's things along the lines of, oh, should I really help them out? They didn't vote for me, and not being as willing to work with governors who may have called him out or representatives. Or that's not how politics are supposed to work. You're supposed to help everyone in the country. So I thought Buttigieg's comments were normal. They were on point, and I didn't think they were particularly harsh. Representative Mace disagreed, but I think part of that was because she was trying to change this narrative. She thought she was walking into a press conference. It was going to be this great photo op, her with some of the folks from CARTA touting this project that came here, and yay, good for you, you're the best. And it didn't go that way. And she got upset, and every single local news headline and coverage of this press conference mentioned right off the bat that she voted against this project, and that is not what she was envisioning. I mean, it couldn't be. She wouldn't put herself in that position if that's what she thought was going to happen. And what was bizarre to me is that she seemed wildly unprepared for the question. I think there was a response, and I honestly was shocked by the quote I read at the top. I thought there was a fairly easy answer that she could have given. Something along the lines of, "Yes, I did vote against the project that funded this. I wasn't against this specific project. I am all for this. However, there was a bunch of stuff tacked onto the bill that I didn't agree with that has nothing to do with South Carolina, has nothing to do with my district, has nothing to do with funding for this project. It was," and she could name a couple things, and that would be it. And they'd be like, "But I fully supported this part of the bill, and I wish that in Congress we could make legislation that didn't involve a bunch of stuff at once. I wish we could just have a single issue and focus on that." Easy, right? Even understandable. And she also, in doing so, should not have tried to take credit for this because she had nothing to do with it. So she just was there to say congratulations to Carta, and then gave an answer like I just gave. I don't think this would have been an issue at all. I think if she were, and also you can watch her clip, you can tell she was annoyed about being asked about it. I think this would have just moved. This would have even been in the news that long. And you wouldn't have seen these headlines like you did. And she just, I was surprised that she didn't have a better answer prepared. And the reason for that is not only as a politician, you should know these things are coming, but she should have definitely known this was coming because the day before, people were tagging her and local news stations a lot on Twitter saying someone better ask her about this. She's going to have a press conference about something she voted against. So I don't know how she didn't know. And I don't know for sure. And I'm not trying to take credit for something if credit's not due. But part of me wonders if this would have happened had a tweet I sent out not been picked up by Jamie Harrison, who is now part of the DNC, and did run against Senator Graham a few years ago for Senate. I had just tweeted simply that she was holding a press conference about this Carta thing. I said tomorrow she's holding a press conference about this, the funding of which came from a bill that Representative Mace voted against. That's all I said. I didn't even provide an opinion. Now later I certainly did, but at the time I didn't. Picked up some retweets, comments, and stuff. People be calling her a hypocrite and some of the things we talked about. But when Jamie Harrison retweeted it, he has like well over 100,000 followers. I forget how many. It may even be way more than that. And so the tweet had some legs to it. And, at least in the South Carolina area, spread a little bit. And it got a lot of interaction, way more than I'm used to, and got comments from people, retweets, mostly people calling her out, a few people defending her, of course. But a lot of people were tagging local news. Now, I'm not taking anything away from local journalists, but part of me wonders, like, would this have even been on their radar? They're so busy with other things. This seems like a routine press conference. Would they have even put two and two together and been like, wait a minute, she's holding a press conference for something she voted against? They might not have thought about it because this stuff happens all the time. So I don't know if all the people tagging them led them to be like, oh yeah, like, is that true? Let's look. Yeah, that is true. Let's look into it. It just seems like after I tweeted it and it got retweeted by him, it blew up. And again, I'm using this term relatively. Wasn't like viral by any means. I'm also not trying to take credit for anybody asking. I'm just saying, maybe that's where this stemmed from, and at least put it on some local media members' radar. But she was asked about it, regardless of if she would have been or not. And the fact that she should have had a better answer, I was just surprised. So in any event, it didn't go the way she wanted. Not a very good day for her at all. But in the grand scheme of things, she could easily move past this. And she tried by saying, she called out Pete Buttigieg for what he said and tried to say like his department, transportation, planes, airlines are a disaster, trains are crashing, and tried to call him out and say like, oh, you shouldn't wade in on this when your own house isn't in order. And that was clearly her trying to change the subject that the media, cycle was all about her having this press conference touting something she had nothing to do with. So she was kind of flailing at that. And looking at the comments to that, it was a lot more people against her than it was supporters. And, especially on Twitter, it's a little shocking when supporters are not outweighing dissenters. But so not a very good day for Representative Mace. But, again, she should have been prepared, and this was an injury that was self-inflicted, to be sure. All right, some good news. Charleston's teachers will soon be receiving an extra $5,000 in their, for their salary. Charleston County School Board unanimously approved the one-time bonus at their June 26th meeting. How are they going to get this money? Well, pandemic relief funds will be reallocated to finance the bonuses, which district staff calculated that it'll probably total about $19.3 million when it's all said and done. But when teachers will see those extra dollars remains a little bit uncertain. Andy Pruitt, who's a district spokesman, said the district hopes sometime in the early fall of 2023. So this upcoming fall, they'll see those bonuses is the hope. The board first needs to decide which items currently funded by what's called the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief program, where they're going to be pulling that money from that program. Those dollars are generally spent on a range of programs and initiatives that include summer school, mental health services, updating HVAC systems, and obviously a lot of it had to do with helping students recover from the pandemic's impact. So obviously this is something you want to make sure that wherever they're pulling the money from isn't going to harm any other programs that are obviously important. Um, During discussion at the board meeting, though, Superintendent Don Kennedy said there's money in every category of that program that can be used for bonuses. They seemed to be pretty confident they were going to find this money and it wasn't going to cause any harm to anything else. So that's good news for our teachers who certainly deserve this bonus. And let's be honest, a lot more. This is a story that happened last week, but I haven't really had a chance to get to it until now. At this point, it's been over a week since James Island resident Jen Drummond was found lying unresponsive and bleeding in the roadway just steps from her home. And that's about all we know. The rest is a mystery. The 34-year-old remains currently unconscious in a hospital with a fractured vertebrae and skull. Surgeons removed part of her skull and replaced it with a titanium plate, according to her family, which has set up a GoFundMe page, by the way, to help her pay for medical bills and then the recovery that she's going to be facing as well. The Charleston County Sheriff's Office and Drummond's family still do not know what happened or how Drummond ended up on Woodland Shores Road with blunt force trauma and a puncture wound to the back of her head. So very much a mystery. Her uncle, Chris Drummond, at this point, he held a press conference on June 27th where the family announced a $1,000 reward for any information about what may have happened to Jen. So deputies who arrived on the scene shortly after 5:30 a.m. on June 21st say they swept the area, but they didn't find any kind of like debris that might have suggested that she was hit by a car that fled the scene, which a lot of people would think is the most logical explanation for what happened. But nothing like that. They didn't find anything. So they're still not entirely sure what exactly happened to Jen. As far as other theories, her uncle Chris dismissed a rumor that had circulated on social media sites saying that she had been shot. So that is not the case either. I shouldn't say either. That is not the case. She could have been hit by a car. There just hasn't been any evidence to support that yet. So on the morning she was found, her dogs, she has a few dogs, they were shut in her room. So her roommate said, well, if they were in her room, obviously she wasn't out walking them, which is what some people thought she may have been doing. The road that she lives on doesn't really have any lights. It's 35 miles per hour on that road, but her roommates and others say that people are constantly going much faster down that road. And there's been a few instances where Jen apparently told her family she had to like dodge cars that were flying down the road and get her and her dogs into like a yard away because they were too close to her. So thankfully, another Charleston area resident by the name of Lauren Caddy, she had come upon Jen on that morning. She was bringing her parents to the airport on June 21st and came across her body at 5:30 a.m., stayed with her and called for, called 911 to get paramedics and everything else there. And if she hadn't done that, who knows how long she would have sat there. It's early in the morning. Who knows when people in that area are up and might have noticed her. She might not be alive if it wasn't for Laura finding her and calling when she did. Estimates based on cell phone records say that, or based on the cell phone records and some other details from roommates and things, police are thinking she may have been laying in the road for about 20 minutes or so. So it wasn't a super long time. Now, if any of you have any information whatsoever, the Charleston County Sheriff's Office is asking that you call a Sergeant Charles Sieben at 843-529-5342. You can also email him. That email is the letter C, then S as in Sam, E Echo, B boy, A Apple, and Nancy at charlestoncounty.org. If it's after hours, you can call dispatch at 843-743-7200. Any information at all. So we, hopefully can figure out what happened to Jen Drummond on that day here on James Island. I know the family would like to know, and if someone had harmed her, which seems to be the case, although it's possible something else happened that didn't involve anybody else. But if it did, they need to be held, certainly need to be held accountable. All right, and our last story today is a national one, and it involves the Supreme Court. Yes, they've done it again. The Supreme Court has overturned the law of the land, and that has had presidents since I think it's been 50 years. But on Thursday, the Supreme Court dealt a major blow to affirmative action in higher education as they struck down race-conscious admissions programs at Harvard and the University of North Carolina. In a ruling that unsurprisingly was divided along ideological lines, the Supreme Court's six-justice conservative majority found that universities discriminated against white and Asian American applicants by using race-conscious policies that benefited applicants from underrepresented backgrounds. The decision, as I mentioned, undercuts long-standing admissions policies at elite colleges and universities that use race as one of the many factors in evaluating applicants. Of course, it was not the only factor, one of many. These policies relied on prior Supreme Court cases that permitted the use of race as part of a holistic process meant to promote a diverse student body and, of course, right the wrongs of some systemic racism that, again, whether it's something that these institutions were aware of or not, when it comes to systemic issues, it's not always something that the people that are involved realize is even happening. But it was a way to have a more diverse student body to make sure people were not missing out on opportunities because of their race. Now, education and civil rights groups say that ending the use of race conscious admissions policies will just make inequality even worse for years to come. It's going to take a long time to correct what is about to happen. Many have pointed to the public institutions that have struggled to enroll diverse freshman classes in the 9 states that have already banned this practice. So it wasn't banned nationally, it is now, but there was 9 states that banned that practice, and they have struggled to enroll diverse freshman classes. It's not because anyone who is not white is not as good as the white students. It's not that they don't deserve to be at these colleges. Again, there's just systemic issues that there may not be any ill intent of each individual in admissions departments and things, but sometimes there are biases in place that you don't even realize. And this is only going to get worse now that the Supreme Court has ruled that this can no longer be used. Unsurprisingly, President Joe Biden had some choice words. He said on Thursday that the Supreme Court is, quote, not a normal court, end quote. He gave some brief remarks at the White House after the ruling. He also talked about how he thinks there still is a need for diversity. He finished up by saying, quote, because the truth is, and we all know it, discrimination still exists in America. Today's decision does not change that. It's a simple fact, end quote. So, as you can tell, I disagree with this decision. I think it's another example of the Supreme Court being ruled by ideologies, not the law and what is right and wrong. There's been some cases that they've ruled in a way that was surprising to me in a good way. But some of these big ones, and of course, Roe v. Wade was the other one, they've overturned decades long precedents in this country and laws that were determined. And also at their hearings, a lot of these judges said, nope, that's the law of the land. Not going to they didn't say specifically not going to overturn it, just that they recognize these laws as law of the land. And, of course, their beliefs now come out. So they've done it again. So some more bad news from the Supreme Court, and I'm sure we'll see the effects of it before too long. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you had a fantastic week and your weekend is amazing. Remember to go to holycitycenter.com/events to find some great plans this weekend. If you want to support the podcast, you can like, subscribe, rate, and review. Any of those things will help on whichever platform you're listening on. You can also support Holy City Center and not just the podcast, the website, and everything else by going to patreon.com/holycitycenter and signing up for one of those tiers. You can also go to holycitycenter.com/shop to pick up some merchandise. I want to thank Cole Collins for producing this and each and every episode of Holy City Center Radio, and Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in every episode as well. And a big thank you to all of you for listening. I can't wait to talk to you on Monday, but I hope the weekend goes by nice and slowly. But until then, good night and good luck.